next thing to do in our simulation model is to connect this control, the time horizon. Right now we have the result from a lifetime time horizon no matter what we choose here. And that's because these cells are linked to these cells on the sheet old drug and the corresponding cells on the sheet new drug. And these cells sum up the costs from all the years of simulation, that is a lifetime time horizon. But what we want this control to do is that when we choose only 5-year or 10-year as the time horizon for our analysis, these cells should only sum up the first 5 years or 10 years and not the whole column. And to be able to do that, we will create a macro. A macro is code performing actions automatically. To create a macro, we go to tag developer. If you can't see this tag, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon and select Developer here. Press OK. Here to the left we have some buttons related to macro. If I press Record Macro, everything I do in the Excel sheet will be recorded by Excel until I press Stop Recording. Then I can go to Visual Basics by clicking here and see the code for what I did in the Excel sheet. So let's record a macro. I click here. I will call the macro time horizon. I will not use a shortcut key. I will store it in this workbook and I don't need a description for this. I press OK. So now it switched here to stop recording and everything I do now will be recorded by Excel. So I write in this cell here, this will be recorded. I press enter, I select the cell again and press delete just to get rid of it. And I choose stop recording. Now let's go to Visual Basic and see the code for what I just did. This is what pops up. If you can't see this, go to View, Project Explorer, and this shows up. This is book 1, which I'm working with right now. And I see down here modules. I open this and find module 1. Double click and here I get the code for the macro time horizon. All macros start with sub and then the name of the macro and ends with end sub. In between we have the code that makes up the macro. Everything that's written after an apostrophe is colored in green and will not be executed by the computer, so here we could write any comments for ourselves. I will just delete these comments for now. So this is the code for what I just did. I was in a cell and entered some kind of formula. In this case I just entered this text. This will be recorded. Then I pressed enter, I selected that cell again, which was the range H24, and I choose delete. So with a selected cell, clear contents, and it all disappeared. Let's delete this and build up the structure for our macro time horizon. I start with a command, time horizon equals 5 years, or time horizon equals 10 years, or time horizon equals lifetime. This is the basic structure. We will have different code executed depending on what time horizon we want for the analysis. In our model, in the sheet, tables, etc., we have this control for the time horizon, and this is the cell link. This cell is actually called time horizon, and this is what we're going to use in our macro. If we have chosen 5 years on the start page, this cell will be 1. If we have chosen 10 years, this will be 2, and if we have chosen lifetime time horizon, this will be 3. This is the information we will use in the macro. So I enter the code if range time horizon, which is this cell here. If this cell is equal to 1, then execute some code, that is change the time horizon to 5 years for the analysis, and then end if. So what the computer will do is that it will go to this cell and check if it's 1. If it is 1, it will change the time horizon to 5 years. If it's not 1, it will continue down here. And here I write if range time horizon equals 2, then end if. So if it's not 1, check if it is 2. That is, if 5 years is not chosen, maybe 10 years is chosen, and change the time horizon to 10 years. But if it's not 2 either, then go down here to lifetime time horizon. If range time horizon equals 3, then change the time horizon to lifetime and end if. This is the basic structure of our macro. If we have chosen a time horizon of 5 years, we want some code here that changes the time horizon of our analysis to 5 years. That means that this cell here, total cost, on the sheet old drug, should only sum up the first 5 rows and not as now the entire row. This is a lifetime time horizon. We should have total cost just from the first 5 years. The same thing with total qualis, just the first 5 years. And the same on the new drug. This should be changed to just sum up the first 5 years and this cell as well. So that's a code we want to have in this area here. In this area we want a similar code, but we want it to change to the first 10 years. And here the lifetime. If we don't know the code, we can record it. So let's go back to the model and record a simple macro. I call it test, I press OK. And here I will write what I will do so I can find it later in the code. Change old costs to 5 year. Enter. And I enter this cell here by double clicking. I go down and grab this corner and just drag it up and make it cover only the first 5 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I press enter. Now I do the same thing for the qualis. Change old qualis to 5 year. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. I press enter. Then I delete this helping text. I go to sheet new drug and I do the same thing. Change new costs to 5 year. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I press enter. Change new qualis to 5 year. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. I press enter and I clean up what I wrote here. Then I press stop recording and I go to Visual Basics. So here we see we have module 1 and module 2. And in this second module, I double click on it. We have our macro test that we just recorded. Sometimes it ends up in module 1. Then we can just see it further below here. If we click here, we see all the macros that are in this module. In this case we just have one, otherwise we would have seen all the different macros here. This is the code for what we just did. Here we have the text that we added just for our own help, so change old cost to 5 year. This is the code for that. Then change old qualis to 5 years, and here we have the code for that. And down here we change the cost for the new drug down here and the qualis down here. So let's just copy this into our macro. I select everything, press Ctrl C, go to module 1 and just paste it in here. And then I'll clean it up a bit. Let's see what we have here. Range AN5 select and write this. Yeah, this is just for ourselves, so I will delete this. Range AN8 select. Which cell is that? Well, we are on the old drug and this is the cell AN8. So this cell is being selected. In the selected cell, enter this formula. Sum R4 see nothing, R8 see nothing. This means make the sum of the range starting 4 rows below the selected cell until 8 rows below the selected cell. And let's see what that means. If we have here 1 row below the selected cell, 2 rows below the selected cell, 3, 4. Here is where the sum starts and it continues to 8 rows below. 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is exactly the first 5 years. I double click and see, yeah, it sums up the first 5 years, which are rows 4 below the selected cell to row 8 below the selected cell. So that's the meaning of this code here. Then we wrote in this help text, I delete it. The computer goes to cell AY8, which is this cell here, AY8. And it enters the same formula. Take the sum from this range, 4 rows below to 8 rows below, which are the first 5 rows, which are the first 5 years. And here I'm just deleting the help text, so I delete this. Then we jump to sheet new drug and select this cell to put in some help text. I delete this. And here I did something, I selected AN6 and I did some scroll. This was scrolling up and down. I just delete this as well. We won't have that in the macro. Here we start. Range AN8, which in the sheet new drug is exactly the same. Here we have it, AN8. And I'm scrolling here as well. I take this away, delete. With this cell, enter this formula from row 4 to row 8, sum, correct. And then I just wrote some more help text. I take that away. AY8, I double check, yes, it's the total qualis, AY8, and we're still on the sheet new drug. Enter this sum from row 4 to row 8. And then I delete the help text. One thing I missed here is that we need to tell the computer here to go to sheet's old drug. So I copy this text and I paste it here and I just substitute new with old. So what the computer does here when we run this macro, it starts to check if we have chosen 5 years for the time horizon. If we have chosen that, the range time horizon will be 1 and then this code will be executed. It will go to sheet's old drug, change this cell to this sum and change this cell to this sum, and then it will do the same thing on the sheet new drug. For the time horizon of 10 years we need similar code as up here. We could go to the Excel sheet and do it all over again, record a macro, change the sum here, change the sum here on old drug and new drug, and copy the new code in here and clean it up. But since the code to change the time horizon to 10 years is similar to the code for changing the time horizon to 5 years, there is a quicker way. We could just copy all this and paste it in here. And all we need to change is actually this sum here. For a 5-year time horizon, it was summing up the rows 5 to row 8. In the case of a time horizon of 10 years, we will need a few more rows here. Let's go back to the model and check how many. So here we had 4 to 8, and this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's continue this down. Make this one a bit wider. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to row 13. So we could just change this 8 to 13 in all these places, and the computer will change to a 10-year time horizon instead of a 5-year time horizon. So let's do that. 13, 13, 13, and 13. And later we will check that this really happens. For the lifetime time horizon we do the same thing. I copy this text, paste it in here, and now let's check what row we should go down to. I drag this down the whole way, 74 it seems to be, to row 74. So I just change this, 74, 74, 74, and 74. This is the final code of our macro. Now it's time to check that it really does what we want it to do. Let's just first clean up the model, the numbers we added here. Delete, and I make this column tighter again, 1.71. On the start page, we now have the results from a 5-year time horizon, because that was what we entered last time. Here we see first 5 rows, same on the qualies. It says lifetime here, but that's because we haven't connected the macro to this control yet. When we switch here, nothing happens to the results. So we have now a 5-year time horizon, and let's say we want to switch that to a 10-year time horizon. And since the macro is not connected, we're gonna do this manually. What happened when we switched here from 5 to 10 was that this cell here changed from 1 to 2. And this is the information we're gonna use in the macro. So I go to the macro, and I will take this away, and I will make the whole screen a bit tighter, like this, so I can see what's going on in the Excel sheet behind. I put the mouse anywhere in the macro and press F8, and this yellow highlighting shows up. Every time I press F8 now, it will jump down 1 row and execute the code, except for these comments here, which it will just skip. So let's see what happens. I press F8 and it will jump down here. If the range time horizon is 1, that's this cell here, it says time horizon here, it's not 1, it's 2. So if it's 1, do this code, if not, just skip it. So now when I press F8, it will just jump down here directly, like this. I press F8 again, and now it checks if this range time horizon is 2, then do this code. And that's true, the range time horizon is actually 2, so now something will happen. I press F8. Now go to Sheets Old Drug. Right now we are at Sheets, Tables, etc. When I press F8 now, it will switch to this sheet, like this. So let's make this so we can see it. And here we have our code. Reach AN8 select, and that's the cell over here. When I press F8 now, this cell will be selected, like this. In this cell, enter this formula. This is the time horizon of 10 years. Right now we have the time horizon of 5 years here. So I press F8, and we see how this value increased. Let's go and double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Escape to get out. Then we go to the range AY8, which is this cell here. F8, it's selected, and enter this formula, which is the time horizon of 10 years. And we double check that as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Correct. I press escape to exit. We continue in the code. Now it will go to the sheet New Drug. We'll see the switch down here. Select AN8, this cell, select it and enter this formula. I double check it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Press escape. Go to AY8, this cell here. I press F8, select it and enter this formula. Double check for the last time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I press escape. It continues down the code. If range time horizon is 3, which is not, it's still 2. Do all this, otherwise just skip it. And if. And here we come down to the end of the macro. I press F8 and it will all stop. Now the time horizon has been changed to 10 years. Our macro worked just fine for a 10-year time horizon. Let's check also for a 5-year and a lifetime time horizon. So I switch to lifetime here, and this cell, time horizon, is now 3. I do exactly the same thing as for a 10-year time horizon, so I put the mouse anywhere here in the code and press F8. And I go down the code pressing F8. If time horizon is 1, which it is not, skips it. If time horizon is 2, which is neither, skips it. If time horizon is 3, and this is what we have. Go to Shields O Drug, select AN8, enter this formula, and let's see what it entered. I double click, yeah, now it's summing up the whole column. I press escape to exit. Then go to AY8, this cell here, and enter the new formula. I double check. Yeah, whole column is being summed up. Escape. Go to new drug. Select AN8. Enter this formula. I double check it. Correct. Go to AY8 and enter this formula. And I double check this. It works just fine. I press escape and just F8 2 more times to end the macro. So now we have the results for a lifetime time horizon. Last check, 5-year time horizon. Range time horizon is now 1. And we do exactly the same thing once again. I enter anywhere here, press F8, and here we start. If range time horizon is 1, which it is, select sheet old drug, select AN8, enter this formula. Double check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then select AY8, the cell over here, enter the formula, and I double check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then go to sheet new drug, select AN8, selected, enter this formula, entered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Press escape. Go to AY8 and enter this formula. Double check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the range time horizon is 2, but it's still 1, so it will just skip that. And if range time horizon is 3, it is not, and it will just skip this as well. And if ends up F8. Now we have checked that our macro really works the way we want. In Visual Basics we don't need to save anything, we can just close this down. But maybe first let's delete the test macro we did. Here it was saved in Model 2. I right click and choose Remove Model 2. Do you want to export anything? No. And it's removed. Make this bigger again. And as I said, no need to save anything, just close this down. But when you want to save this file, now when it has a macro, you can't save it as a normal Excel file because then the macro won't work. So go to File, Save As, and choose here Excel Macro Enabled Workbook, XLSM. Say, if you have problems running a macro in an Excel file, you probably have the wrong settings. So you go to File, Options, Trust Center Settings, Macro Settings, and make sure you have Enable All Macros or Disable All Macros with notification, and you just need to enable them when you open the file, and press OK. OK. The last thing to do is to connect this control to the macro. So when we choose time horizon here, the macro runs automatically and we don't have to go to Visual Basics for applications and run it with F8. We do that by right-clicking on the control and choosing Assign Macro. And here we have our macro, Module 1 Time Horizon. I select it and press OK. So let's check. Now we have 5 years time horizon here. We have 5 rows adding up on old drug and 5 rows on new drug. When I now switch to 10 years, it should change automatically to sum up the first 10 rows. I choose here 10 years, and this happens. We are on sheet new drug, and the macro stopped here on AY8, the last cell to change the formula. We check old drug. We here have 10 rows. Same for qualis and new drug. 10 rows, 10 rows. So it worked correctly, but it stopped here on AY8 sheet new drug. We would like to have the macro to run and then come back to this sheet so we can change the time horizon and then see the results directly here. So we go back to Visual Basic. Here we have Model 1 and we have our macro time horizon here. In the end, we're just gonna add a little bit of code. We will make it to go back to Sheet's start page and then choose a cell up here. Let's take range A1. If you don't know this code, you can just record it and paste it in as we did before. Sheets, start page, select range A1, select. And no need to save, just close this, and we try to run it for a lifetime time horizon. Now what the macro should do is to go to tables etc. and check the range time horizon, go to old drag, insert new formula, go to new drag, insert the new formulas, and then go back to this start page and choose this cell up here. So I choose lifetime, and that's probably what happened. It's stopped here, start page, A1. Here we have now a lifetime time horizon for cost and qualis for the old drug, and the same thing for the new drug. We could improve the macro a little bit more by making it avoid to jump back and forth between the sheets and have the screen flashing. Now when we switch here, we have this flashing screen, which can be annoying. So we go back to Visual Basic and just add a little bit of code right up here. When the macro starts, do this application screen updating is false. This means that the screen won't update, it will just run the code and stop. I close this, and now I try again. I switch to a 10-year time horizon. The macro was working, but we didn't see it because the screen is not updating, and it stopped here, and we have the results updated. For a lifetime time horizon, 12 qualis for new drug, 11 for old drug. We switch to 60 years and see if it works here as well. 5-year time horizon, just around 3 qualis. 10-year, 5 and 4 qualis. Lifetime up to 6, 7 qualis.